What's up? Brian Tong here, and this is my review for Apple's new M4 iPad Pro. You got it right here, and if you can't see it right now, that's because it's the thinnest product Apple has ever made, thinner than the iPod Nano. I mean, can you even see it? Okay, well, let me show you. It's right here. Now, Apple sent a fully loaded iPad Pro 13-inch model for the purpose of this review, but it's going to be going right back to them, and this is a fully loaded 2 terabytes of storage, which means that has the M4 chip with a maximum 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU, and then the 16-core neural engine and 16 gigs of unified memory. So this is a freaking beast, and if there was ever, an iPad that is OP, and hey mama, that means overpowered, this is it. And we're going to talk about all that power, but the first thing that you see is its incredible design. This 13-inch iPad Pro is 5.1 millimeters thin, right? It's barely thicker than the USB-C Thunderbolt port that is right here on the bottom. I mean, if you can see it, it's just barely thicker than that. And to me, it's a true marvel of engineering and design with how thin and how powerful it is. I mean, yes, an iPad is an iPad, but I'm just gonna let you know, this is different. I already know the comments are coming and people are saying, I can't wait to see it bend. And I've always said, hey, if you wanna bend something, it will bend. But how many of you have actually bent your iPad in half by accident? Yeah, not many of you. Now, Apple says, even with this new thin design, it is just as rigid and as strong as the previous M2 iPad Pro, so we'll find out eventually, but I'll just wait for you to actually hold this thing in person, feel how thin, light, and solid it is, and for everyone saying, we never asked for a thinner iPad, it's going to impress you. Now, the other thing that is going to impress you is this display. It pops, it looks so good. I don't know if it can pop from here, but Apple calls it its tandem OLED display. It is 2 OLED panels stacked on top of each other. So the light path of the second OLED panel underneath, that goes through the first one, since the first OLED is transparent to light that's generated by the second OLED. And that's what allows this OLED display to be bright enough to meet Apple's XDR display standard. So its results are 1000 nits of full screen brightness for both standard and HDR content, and then 1600 nits peak HDR brightness to give you that specular details that you can really pop on screen from whether it's photos or videos. And this has ProMotion, so it supports a variable refresh rate from 10 Hertz to 120 Hertz. Now, the previous M2 iPad Pro actually hits these same benchmarks using mini LED display technology, but the difference is with OLED, you get those deeper inky blacks with the individual pixel control that reduces the blooming or that white halo effect that you can get from mini LED displays. I've seen so many comments that are saying, what about OLED burn-in? Well, guess what? Your iPhone is an OLED screen, and specifically with tandem OLED displays, the general longevity of its dual stack OLED display is more than a decade, and by that time, you probably won't be using the iPad anymore. I mean, yeah, people use these for longer amounts of time, and even if you do, it still should be okay. One thing to mention here though, there is a nano texture option for the iPad Pro display, but that's only for the 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte iPad Pro models. Now this diffuses the light and reduces glare. It's a $100 upgrade if you want it, but for me, it really depends on how you use this device. Now the nano texture, it does a little bit of muting those deep blacks a little bit, so there is gonna be a trade-off, and it can even make text kind of look softer at times. Apple says that the nano texture glass option not going all the way to the edge of the iPad Pro was both a design decision and a technical decision. I have a Pro Display XDR. You see it also on the Studio Display. That nano texture coating on those goes all the way covering the entire bezel, but not on the iPad Pro. But if you're planning to use this outside in the field for shoots or creative projects, or you're just in a really very bright work area with lots of lights and reflections, then I'd say it's probably worth the upgrade. Now for me, I actually use a Pro Display XDR, a big display while I edit video with the nano texture coating, but for an iPad, I think I'm gonna go with a standard display for this iPad Pro. It's just something to consider. I've been a fan of the paper-like screen protectors that you can get third-party in the past, so I might go for that this time around. Now, another benefit of this stacked tandem OLED is that the new iPad Pro is significantly thinner. I mean, you can see it right here. I'm gonna hold it up to the camera, like, look at, I mean, if you look at how, I don't even have sausage fingers and this still looks thin. Like, you can see it right here. This is a 12.9 inch M1 iPad Pro that has the same dimensions as the M2 iPad Pro. Just want to use them for comparison. So the earlier iPad Pros, it's 6.4 millimeters thick, and then compared to the 5.1 millimeters thick new iPad Pro, that is a significant difference. Bottom line, the hardware design here, it is stellar, and it still gets roughly 10 hours of battery life in this thinner body. And for those of you who are screaming, we never asked for a thinner iPad, I see the comments. The iPad battery life has personally never been an issue for me, even on long flights. But of course, don't we always want better battery life and performance? Yes, but this is not a deal breaker for me. Now, the tech that ties all this together and makes it all work is Apple's new M4 chip. The iPad Pro skipped the M3, and this is the first Apple product to get the M4. It's based on second generation 3 nanometer technology, which means that it's even more power efficient to allow for similar battery life even in this thinner design. Now, it has an all new display engine that specifically drives this dual layer OLED display. And yes, it is beefier too, bringing a 50% increase in CPU performance compared to the previous M2 chip in the last iPad Pro. It also gets a beefed up GPU with up to 4 times faster performance compared to the M2. And then its 16-core neural engine is Apple's biggest ever, and we'll see how it unlocks new AI tasks specifically at WWDC 24. But there are real benefits that I already saw with the ability to go into something like Final Cut Pro, and you can take a person dancing from a background and then have a text title on top of them, but then create a duplicate layer and then choose this option to rotoscope them to put them over the text title now while removing the background on the top layer, keeping the text, and then keeping the background layer on the bottom. And this isn't happening in minutes or seconds, but instantly, and it's happening on device. That is incredible. Now, the new Logic 2 can take an audio track that's already been mixed together. So think about a finished song, and then it uses this tool or option called the stem splitter that separates the vocals, the drums, the bass, and other sounds as individual tracks that you can manipulate in seconds. It just pulls them out, and the vocals still retain their organic quality.
Instead of looking at the warnings, your energy, I feel the warmth in, ignoring all despair, you're no fair.
So this is just another example of what it's capable of. And there's so much more that can be done in Logic I didn't show you. Now, with the M4, there is one caveat that you need to be aware of. In order to get the M4 chip with all of that power available, you have to get the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte storage options to get the fully loaded M4 10-core CPU with that's 4 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores, and then 16 gigs of unified memory. You got the 256 and 512 gig storage models that only have an M4 with a 9-core CPU, so that's 3 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores and 8 gigs of unified memory. Now, if you're doing high-end video work or work with 3D graphics, then I'd say obviously go with the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte options, but I think Apple should have just given the full processor to all models. I don't think it would have hurt anyone. Now, before we jump into what else all that performance can do, I want to at least talk about what is different and what the new iPad Pro loses from the last generation model. Now, this new iPad Pro has an improved 12 megapixel camera sensor on the back. That's with a True Tone flash that is new, but it loses the ultra wide 10 megapixel camera that used to be on the M2 iPad Pro. So the new iPad Pro still has 4 speakers for great audio, but this has 4 studio microphones instead of 5, so it loses 1 microphone from the last generation. And those specific choices show that people probably weren't using the iPad Pro for capturing and creating media content that much. I mean, I get it, but to me, I don't think many people really upgraded to the M2 because the M1 and previous iPads were already good enough. So even if we didn't use it that way, I think it's a bummer to lose them and just to see them take it away. Now, there's also no physical SIM card slot here anywhere. I mean, if you look at every single edge, you will not see one. And that means that this only supports eSIM, right? Apple's efforts to remove all the plastic from the packaging also means that you won't be getting any stickers anymore. And I'm sorry. And I didn't forget that the front-facing 12 megapixel camera, this is an ultra-wide camera, is no longer, it's no longer here on the top portrait mode, but it has been moved over here to the landscape edge up top here so that your FaceTime calls are all centered up and look a lot better when you're using it in landscape mode, which most of us are. You're not kind of peeking over to the side anymore. And that also means there's a new magnetic and charging system for Apple's new Apple Pencil Pro, which I have right here. Now, the Apple Pencil Pro levels up what you can do with the same dimensions as the previous Apple Pencil, and you know it's Pro because it literally says it here on the end of it. But it has a new gyroscope sensor and a haptic engine that brings new capabilities. The squeeze gesture, where all I do is just squeeze the pencil itself, this is, brings different writing tools when in something like the Notes app or Freeform, and you can select one of the different brush styles you want to use. You can change the color and opacity right there as well. And in different apps, the squeeze gesture will bring up different options specific to those apps. You have things like Procreate, which is very custom to this, or Adobe Fresca. Now, the Apple Pencil Pro still supports hover. So now with that new barrel roll feature where when you hold in hand, you can twist the pencil, you can see me rotating the pencil and the angle of my brush stroke changes. So I can put down a thin line if I want, then rotate it to put down a thicker line using the same brush. And for digital artists that are calligraphy artists as well, you can use the barrel roll while you're writing to create that variety between thin and thick in a single stroke. Now, Apple says it still has the same response time of 9 milliseconds, which is as good as it gets. And you can also pull up the pencil tools. And if you want, right, that's with the squeeze. If you want to undo, you can hold the Pencil Pro down on that undo icon, and then a semicircle will appear that lets you undo the previous steps. So each notch you see here is a pen stroke that you made, and as you scroll it back and forth, you'll feel the haptic feedback as you move along it. So that's really cool. Now here's another subtle thing that you might not notice, but when I hover over the iPad Pro in an app like Notes, you're gonna see a shadow of the Apple Pencil, but it's a digital creation of a shadow that will match the writing tool you're using. So it could be the pencil or the thicker marker or the eraser. And if you can see this, that digital shadow, it appears when the Apple Pencil Pro is being brought close enough to the iPad with the hover feature. So just some cool features, but this is really third-party apps like Procreate who have aligned with Apple that take full advantage of all that software and the new hardware features that the iPad Pro has to offer with each new generation. I mean, they've been really working hand in hand with them. You can do real-time animation with the Apple Pencil in Procreate Dream to create a transforming cone that moves along a path in real time, or you can apply a lens blur on a layer of an animated video without waiting for any type of rendering at all, and then playing back the result instantly. Like this stuff, this power combined with this pencil for some of these apps is voodoo magic for digital artists. And if you're the type of person who misplaces your Apple Pencil, well, the new Apple Pencil also has Find My support now. So the new Apple Pencil Pro, this is $129. All right, let's talk Magic Keyboard. And I broke it down in my M4 iPad Pro unboxing video, just comparing the new Magic Keyboard to the old one. You should check it out. But this is thinner and lighter by about 30 grams compared to the previous Magic Keyboard. The aluminum palm rest here, I'm gonna put this down. I'm gonna drop in our iPad Pro. But this aluminum palm rest here, it just feels so classy. It feels really nice. The trackpad is significantly larger. It has haptic feedback like a MacBook. Let me change my orientation of the iPad here so we can get, there we go. All right, you have the function row now for quick controls, and it charges faster when the iPad Pro is connected via power. The hinge here is even smaller. It's just a little more narrow, more like an oval-shaped hinge compared to the larger circular hinge of the previous one. Although this does have the same angle when you open it up all the way. When I say all the way is when you lean it back. But before angling the stand, it actually opens up to a full vertical position, unlike the previous Magic Keyboard, which is kind of angled forward like this before you actually do the rotation on it. So there's just a little more usability here with this new Magic Keyboard. And when you use this combined with the new iPad Pro, it literally feels like a MacBook type experience. It's just not running macOS. I mean, you really can't deny that when you look at this, this is exactly how it looks and feels, almost like a MacBook. Like from a distance, someone might think that. Like, Apple, are you telling us that you also are looking at this like a MacBook? Like, I know I'm fishing, I'm just asking. And I think one more thing about this keyboard case is that the iPad is absolutely its thinnest and lightest when it's not in its case at all. I mean, it's a little lighter than the previous generation when combined here with the Magic Keyboard. But then once you have the Magic Keyboard case on it and you close it up, it honestly feels exactly like an M1 or M2 iPad Pro. Even when you look at this, right? If I put it on its stand and I face it towards you, okay, when it's on its stand, you don't see or feel how thin it is. So there are times where it feels exactly the same as before. Now the Magic Keyboard is $299 for the 11-inch model and then $349 for the 13-inch model. Also, the new Apple Pencil Pro and the new Magic Keyboard, they only work with the new iPad Pro and the new iPad Airs because of the new magnetic and charging system from the relocation of this landscape camera. But I think that they should have done what they could do, at least to maybe make it backwards compatible with the previous Apple Pencil. I mean, if they told us the exact technical reasons why they couldn't, just because the landscape camera is there, could we shift the pen over a little bit? Like, maybe it would make me feel better as long as we knew. But the basic USB-C pencil that Apple released at the end of last year, that works with the new iPad Pro hardware that was announced. But the previous Apple Pencil 2, that does not work with the new iPad Pro. And I know this because I tried it, so you can be let down here from me and not in person trying it for yourself, just guessing. So yeah, that's a sad Apple. Aww. Now all the new hardware and accessories, they are welcome improvements, but most people are still probably going to use this new iPad in the same way that they did before. I mean, let's just be honest, and they can still use their current iPads, whatever model that they have, the same way that they do today. And I know for the longest time, right, the consumer feedback has been to unlock the iPad and give us Mac OS on it. If there was any time to finally open it up, I think now would be the time, because we're gonna have to wait until WWDC to find out. Apple has treated the iPad like a separate device that can do your basic stuff like email, web surfing, and watching videos, and then also do these uniquely great things with a touch screen and then digital artists and creatives, especially with the Apple Pencil. They can do so much more than obviously you can do on a Mac. They have given us Final Cut Pro and Logic for higher end production. And then you got high-end 3D creation apps like Uniform and ZBrush that are being used by the creatives at Pixar today. Those are coming to the new iPad Pro as well. So when people say it does not use all its power, I kind of disagree. I would say it does, but it's unleashed specifically for apps and creative use cases that just a very small percentage of people use, and then you have a very vocal percentage of people that don't use them at all. There is no device that can do what the iPad Pro can do when you're talking about Procreate, right? Video editing and 3D apps used on a large touchscreen display. Even I don't use it as my main primary device for video editing, but I can still absolutely edit videos on it, and I have, but I haven't made it my primary device. Now the new Final Cut Pro 2, they have this new cool multicam setup that they teased to us that allows you to use multiple iPhones as cameras in different spots and then edit the stream by just tapping on Final Cut Pro 2's software, the camera angle that you want during playback, and just creating this seamless, like camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. I thought that was really slick, and that makes it even more useful for someone like me. And that's one of the legit killer apps for creatives that will be coming later this spring. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. Now, I know that it's clear the general public, they want this to also run Mac OS. Like, how many years have we said, if only Apple made it like the Surface, but in Apple's way? Like, hey, I'd love for that to happen too. I've been begging for that for years. Like, I was begging for Final Cut Pro and they finally brought it. But if I'm being honest, I do think I've probably been beaten down a little bit into submission, hoping it still happens with macOS after so many years of nothing. Like, would I want a full desktop Photoshop and full desktop Premiere to run on an iPad? Yes, absolutely. Apple already announced that the MacBook Air is the world's best-selling 13-inch laptop and the best-selling 15-inch laptop. So to me, if they already have those two spots locked in from a sales standpoint, of established themselves as leaders, it's not like they're really hurting themselves now to open up the Mac OS and put it on an iPad anymore. I think not having Mac OS does not make the iPad a bad device, like some people really claim. I repeat, it does not make it a bad device. And there's a lot of things it does great that other devices can't do either, but it could do so much more with macOS also running it on it as an option. The hardware is primed to support it. That's not going to be an issue. And I'd like to see that be part of the next evolution of iPad. So, hey, maybe something along those lines happens at WWDC 24. We're just going to have to wait and see. Now you have the entry-level iPad Pro 11-inch with 256 gigs of storage with Wi-Fi. That starts at $999. So that's $200 more than what the previous 11-inch iPad Pro started at. And I can imagine most of that cost comes from the new Tandem OLED display. You got the new M4 chip and then a redesign of the body. Then you have the 13-inch iPad Pro with 256 gigs of storage with Wi-Fi. That starts at $1299. That's a $300 jump. You got the nano texture coating. That is an additional $100 option on the higher storage iPad Pros. And the Wi-Fi and cellular option, that's an additional $200 if you want to do that. But hey, power tip, I just use my iPhone to tether to the iPad, so you can save money that way if your cellular plan supports tethering. Now, also, when I see in the comments that are honestly fueled with a little bit of extra fire screaming at that price, just get a MacBook Air. Well, look, my response is just get what you need based on your budget, however you decide to configure this thing or whatever thing, right? The iPad Pro gives you options and you can decide if it makes sense for you, but it's not a Mac, and a Mac isn't an iPad either. So it all comes down to just how you're planning to use these devices. I sometimes don't get why people are so upset, and this is not going to change until Apple decides that it wants to give us and make the ultimate holy grail hybrid device. Like, I've been an iPad guy from the very beginning. I was in attendance at that keynote where Steve Jobs showed it off when before it, critics were poo-pooing the iPad until they actually saw the demos. I've jokingly called this the most intimate Apple product I've ever had because look, you can use this, hold it in so many ways. You can lean back with it. You can have it on your lap. You can lay down on it, on your stomach using it. It's so versatile, and you're touching the screen constantly, which creates this different kind of connection to it. I even know people that play games until they literally fall asleep with it on their chest with a case stand. Like, it doesn't get any more intimate than that, and maybe those people should probably also get some help. But I am with you that the iPad software, it could do more, but honestly, I still enjoy the heck out of it. I love the iPad Pro, and it continues to do more, even if it's sometimes even above what myself and most creators do. It has a specific use, right? Creative digital artists, this is absolutely the device to get. And the design, this is peak iPad. So I'm upgrading, and I'll also be waiting to see what new software capabilities come along with this, what I call like the new era of the iPad Pro. I'm a hopeful person in that way, and that might burn me. But if you can't tell already, come on, it's a good Apple for me, especially after my last upgrade was an M1. But what is it for you, and what iPad you currently have? That makes a difference as well. How are you going to use this? But hey, put in the comments because you all know that I read them. I just think, like, sure, I say good Apple, but the design, this is spectacular Apple. This is, yeah, it's an iPad. We know what an iPad looks like, but feel this, hold it. Whew. This design is a spectacular Apple. All right, everybody, we will see you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Peace and love.